Hello, my name is Joanita Drazuru Kayonga. I'm Ugandan and I've spent my life here, that's all 35 years, with 6-month visits to Canada about 10 years ago, and that was twice, and 6 months in Australia as well. I will, however, be comparing Uganda to the United States of America using Geert Hofstede's cultural dimensions model. I have chosen to look at Uganda, of course, because it's the country I live in, and I also understand its culture well enough. And I will be comparing it to the USA because it also happens to be a country that we did study in high school geography, but more in the movies and different series. Definitely, the culture of the US has permeated our society so intensely through the internet as well. I'll be giving you details about Uganda, just an introduction where I'll tell you about why I've chosen the Hofstede model, why telling you more about Uganda, its location and culture. I'll be comparing it to the US and also be sharing the effects of the results of the dimensions, the measures, the effects that they have on communication, motivation, and teamwork as well. Uganda is called the Pearl of Africa, and this is a map of Africa that you can see right here. And the blue arrow is pointing at where Uganda is, that little red tiny country right there. It's a landlocked country, but it's got 5 freshwater lakes internally, and it's bordered by South Sudan to the north, the Democratic Republic of Congo to the west, Kenya to the east, Rwanda, Burundi, and Tanzania to the south. And those are the countries that do make up the East African community, and Uganda is right in the center of that in East Africa. Uganda has over 56 tribes. I'll come back to that picture later. Uganda has over 56 tribes that belong to 4 ethnic groups. The biggest ethnic group is the Bantu, and that the largest tribe from the Bantu is a tribe called Baganda, and it was an organized group from which the name Uganda was carved. When we were gaining our independence in 1962. Uganda was a British protectorate, and we got our independence on the 9th of October 1962. Since then, the country has actually had 9 presidents, with the longest serving one still in power today. That was since January 1986. He has been here that long. Now, to the previous picture, this is an actual picture of our taxi park, the oldest taxi park in the United States. What you refer to as taxis are, I think from what I've seen in movies, yellow cabs, salon cars that are 5-seaters. In Uganda, this is what they look like. They're 14-seater rides, which are often filled with extra passengers. So rather than sitting 3 at a time, you find yourselves squeezing as 4. Yes, that's what the culture is like. Everybody gets accommodated. Moving on, that is the map of Uganda. The tribes that you see represented here from West Nile, that's where I come from. The Acholi, Karamoja, Lango, Teso. These are just few. There are so many more other tribes. Like I said, there are over 56, and this is just a depiction of the larger ones rather than the smaller ones included. The smaller ones are not included in this. Majority of the country identify as Christians under the Protestant and Catholic denominations, as well as the Pentecostal denomination, and then it's followed by a large population of Muslims, and then those who practice African traditional religions still. The picture you see here is of members of the interreligious council that has Muslim clerics, Anglican clerics, an Orthodox leader, as well as a Catholic leader. That's the picture that you see here. There's an actual interreligious council. We'll be looking at Hofstede's 6 dimensions and how Uganda does in relation to the US. Now, as you plan to visit Uganda, please take note of 3 particular dimensions out of the 6 that are listed here that I believe would help you understand Ugandans and how to navigate your relationships with them. The very first important one, if you look at this, or before we even go into the 3, as you can see, I've used Tanzania as for the measurement. Uganda was not included in Hofstede's study, but Tanzania borders us to the south and we're pretty much very similar. There are very few differences. The only one that I think is worth pointing out is Tanzania was more socialist in its political development, while Uganda went more capitalist in its development. So as you can see, power distance, Tanzania's power distance score is high compared to that of the US. That's very accurate with Uganda. When it comes to individualism, the US scores, Tanzania scores really low, while the US score is really high. And just like Uganda, we are a collectivist society, more of a collectivist society, opposed to being an individualistic society. When it comes to motivation towards achievement and success, I believe that's also related to the individualism in a way. People are more driven towards success in the US, while here it's more about relationships and making sure family is okay. Then uncertainty avoidance, almost similar. I'd say it's the same with Uganda. And then long-term orientation, with the US being more long-term oriented in their outlook, while Tanzania and Uganda are more short-term. And then in terms of indulgence, the US has a higher score, while Tanzania and Uganda have a low score. The 3 dimensions that I'll be focusing on are power distance, individualism, and then long-term orientation. Power distance in Uganda, Hofstede says power distance is related to the different solutions to the human problem of inequality. Now, if you look at this picture in Uganda, of a setting in Uganda, this is actually a parliamentary sitting, and the lady you see kneeling is an actual minister. But because our setting is patriarchal, and as well there's the gender factor is strong, you can see she's come and she's giving respect to the elders by kneeling and greeting the ministers who are much older than her and who are gentlemen. That's one factor that leads to that has contributed to a high power distance in Uganda. Unlike the USA, our power distance is high. Hofstede explains it by saying here in Uganda, to use his words, people accept a hierarchical order in which everyone has a place and which needs no further justification. The power one has can come from their gender, as it's still a heavily patriarchal society, like I already said. Then either their age, the older people are more respected, and then social status. You can see the picture again for an example. Also, women kneeling is seen as a sign of respect. In this picture, a female minister kneels to greet older male ministers in a professional setting. Now, you have to take note, if you do come to Uganda, when anyone kneels to greet you, please consider that they're showing you respect first and not begging. And it would make them feel awkward if you refused to receive their greeting. Over time, as you get to know each other, you can say, oh, no, you don't have to kneel, and it will be fine. But most people will insist on kneeling when they're greeting someone who's older and male. Also note that on a negative side, a high power distance has yielded results like fear and timidity. So when you ask questions and receive silence, the likelihood is that those you're speaking to are afraid to speak up and be wrong, because there's often been punishment for being wrong. They're used to the person in charge having all the answers and providing them with those. It would do well for you to intentionally ask questions and voice reassurances that can help them be comfortable. Over time, they will grow to trust you. You can also practice the communication skill of looping by politely asking them to confirm their action points. This way, you will know if you've been understood or not. When it comes to individualism, which is the second dimension, I think is very relevant for anyone coming to visit Uganda compared to the USA, which is an individualistic society. Uganda is more collectivist. It's very common to find extended families like the one I live in with my mother-in-law and my grandma-in-law. This usually means that Ugandans have a lot more responsibility on their hands compared to American families that are nuclear in nature. Work is really just a tool to take care of the needs of the group rather than to just further one person's career along. We is more important than I. So if you want to succeed, it's important to get the group leader, then you will get the whole. The third dimension I thought that was worth looking at is the long-term orientation. To just explain, this picture that you see here is of a traditional marriage happening between somebody from a Caucasian person and a Ugandan man from Buganda. In Uganda, culture is very important. Traditions, how people have run things are very, very important. Another thing to take note of is that can help explain how Uganda is more short-term oriented. Uganda's president has been in power since 1986, and every 5 years, there's a population of a country that votes him into power. And that's because there's a fear of change that leads people to make the choice that makes the next 5 years predictable for them. They would rather stick to the usual norms than do anything new that would destabilize them for a little while, but rather serve them in the long run. The most important thing for Ugandans is to have food on the table and make sure the kids are in school. An American would have to communicate with clarity how quickly achieving their goals would benefit the Ugandans for them to get on board with their style of working. Now, this is the opposite of the USA, where every president gets at most 2 4-year terms in office. These differences will affect communication, motivation, and teamwork in the following ways. Formal communication is definitely preferred in a Ugandan setting and will be acted on faster than informal communication, and that's because of the power distance effect. For an American who's in Uganda, just again, you have to ensure that you practice looping when you give instructions. For example, the difference in the accents can cause misunderstanding. So you have to ask and receive feedback if you want to know that you communicated well as giving clear timelines with grace to the people because of the polychronic nature of how we deal with time in Uganda. With motivation, since groups and family are very important, rewards should center on developing and making time for family and the groups. Once again, it's important for any leader to identify the group leader or the influencer and get them on your side. That way, if you have a group leader, the rest of the team will be motivated to work. Then you can also go ahead by organizing, help motivate the team by organizing team bonding activities that do not involve work, but fun and play, because people build relationships and good relationships result in goals being met. In regards to teamwork, that will also help, but it would be wise to figure out healthy conflict resolution solutions and practices, because most people here can be conflict avoidant because of the fear of damaging group dynamics. So one has to teach them healthy conflict resolution if you want to have authentic teamwork in your work setting. Also, consider first giving orders to establish respect before you get your hands dirty, or before participating fully. They must recognize you as a boss. And teamwork involves supporting a superior in their tasks. When they receive instruction and know what to do, then they will do it and they'll feel like you're working as a team. And that's also because of the power distance effect. The scripture that I thought would be relevant to any leader coming to serve, and that would make it easy, is 1 Peter chapter 4 verse 10. And it says, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. And I think that's very, very relevant to us. Thank you so much.